Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the LitRPG Podcast, episode number 126 of the show. I'm Ramon Mejia, and I'm here to bring you the latest LitRPG news, reviews, and of course, author interviews. And this week I have 5 new LitRPG titles just for you folks at home. But before we do that, I want to make sure I give a shout out to our latest Patreon subscriber and supporter, Apollo's Thorn. He most recently became a patron. I think he was before. He is again. Either way, he deserves a nice shout out. He and like the many other supporters like yourselves who are watching this, you guys, make this show possible. Without your support, whether it's financial or whether it's watching the show and talking about it and just enjoying it, it wouldn't be here, and definitely wouldn't be ad free because these things cost money. Not a lot, but still not free. Not free to make, I should say. So, Apollo Thorn's support on Patreon, I really does actually help cover just like the fundamental costs for doing this kind of podcast with new elements and purchasing books and doing that kind of stuff, like the fundamental cost of stuff. So Apollo Thorn, thank you very much, man, for being such a great supporter of the show, and I know you've enjoyed it for quite a long time, so I appreciate that, man. Anyone else who wants to become a patron supporter can find out all the ways to do so at patreon.com/geekbytespodcast. I know it doesn't say the LitRPG Podcast. Geek Bytes Podcast is the one that I did first, and that's the Patreon page I made. But this one Patreon covers multiple podcasts, basically. So you're not just supporting this podcast, but many other struggling podcasts as well. So thank you everyone who wants to support us there on Patreon. So thanks a lot. Okay, now the 5 LitRPG reviews that I have for you folks at home include External Threat, Reality Benders book number 2. Then it's going to be Deadhead, a zombie apocalypse LitRPG novella. Out of that'll be The Apprentice of Arabella. Then it will be World Tree Online, and last but not least, Rogue Dungeon, a LitRPG adventure, The Rogue Dungeon, book number 1. There we go. Okay, before we get into that, we're going to do some LitRPG news. And in LitRPG news, we're going to begin with a nice story about the latest Game Read show hosted by Sean Callahan. He actually interviews Eric Nyland, the author of the Hero of Thera series. So it's a interesting interview. Go check it out. There will link in the show notes. Also remember to subscribe to Game Reads on YouTube so you can get all the latest interviews that Sean Callahan has done. In other LitRPG news, Tao Wong is the author of the LitRPG series System Apocalypse, The Adventures on Rad, and A Gamer's Wish. Actually, from really good LitRPG series. He recently launched a Patreon page for people who want to support his writing on that platform. See, another Patreon user. It's actually a really good way to support the authors and artists that you enjoy. It's like a monthly recurring subscription, but like a monthly donation to support them, basically. You get some really nice rewards there. Tao Wong has some as well. For $1 a month, you will get a nice thank you. For $5 a month, you actually get a free copy of his latest ebook, access to chapters of his latest stories as they are being written, and short story exclusives. At $10 a month, you get influence the story with suggestions, and you get to vote on which series the author works on next. $20 a month, you get free audiobooks from the author, a chance to name and describe some of the races in the stories. At $50 a month, you get to see the novel outlines. Of course, plus all the other things, all the other previous words. And at $100 a month, you get to see the author's personal notes, plus all the other previous rewards. So there you go. Those are other rewards. They seem a little skewed towards $5 a month to $10 a month. But hey, if you're supporters, if you love Tao Wong stuff, go support them on Patreon. You not only get some good rewards, but you also support an author that you enjoy. Okay. Also, Michael Chatfield, author of the Amarillo series, is selling merch now. Or at least he's trying to. He's trying it out. He posted recently on Facebook that he's testing out a new merchandising option from Amazon called Merch by Amazon. According to Amazon's page on the service, they describe it this way. Simply upload your artwork, choose a product type and color, set your price, and add a product description. We'll create a product page on Amazon.com, and when customers buy your product, we'll handle production, shipping, and customer service, all with no upfront cost. Basically, it's a similar concept to what their ebooks do. You do the work as far as like creating the product. They market it. They do all the customer service stuff. So they'll do shipping, handling, and you get according to the description, you get a royalty every month on the stuff that gets sold. So you don't have to worry about taxes and whatever else, except for like income tax, but like no sales tax. Amazon Compare will do that for you, which is actually a kind of important feature. More recently, I believe there's a Supreme Court. I could be mistaken. It was a Supreme Court decision that said that online retailers will have to pay sales tax, and so it gets to be a little more complicated recently for online transactions. So this might be a good way for a lot of people to do merchandising for their stuff without having to worry about the hassle of like working on specific state taxes versus the state that they're selling taxes and all that other stuff. So there you go. For me personally, I think that's a pretty cute shirt. I'd rather see one that says, I was trapped in Amarillia and all I got was this lousy t-shirt. And if I get that, I would absolutely buy that shirt. So there you go. My 2 cents. Okay, there you go. Few stories that are out now that I haven't had a chance to read yet. There's only one actually. Raven Rex, LitRPG Saga, The Binding Book number 2, just came out this week. It was actually supposed to originally be released on August the 30th. That was when the pre-order release date was. But it's out now instead. So if you liked book 1 in that series, you might like book 2. We'll have to find out together. In new LitRPG audiobooks, there's only a couple new LitRPG audiobooks out this week as well, including the Shard Warrior Crystal Shards Online book number 2. We gave it a 7 out of 10. As far as the ebook review goes, we have a link in the show notes if you want to read that full review for the ebook version. But again, things change sometimes for the audiobook. Sometimes they get better, sometimes they get worse, depending upon the narrator's quality and the how they read the story. So always listen to, of course, the samples on Audible or wherever you get your Audible or your audiobooks. Also out as an audiobook is Respawn, an epic fantasy lit RPG. We give it a score of 6 out of 10 for the ebook. You might like it more. It might be better as an audiobook. I don't know. Haven't listened to it yet. That's a different podcast now. But definitely it is out. So there you go. Okay, some upcoming LitRPG. This is just when I read off the stuff that I know is coming out in the near future. We have a few new additions to this list, but you feel free to skip ahead if you want to. On the 31st of July, Sleeping Player, Project Chrysalis book number 3 is going to be out. On the August the 1st, Wizard Lords Legends of Legends, LitRPG Fantasy, on August the 1st. Also on August 1st is The Curse of Hurlig Ridge, World Tree Online, first dive on August the 7th. It'll be Death March, Euphoria Online. On the 24th of August, it'll be Bitter, book number 4. On September the 24th, skipping all the way into September, we have Game Changer, Reality Benders, book number 3. Book 2 in that series just came out, so book 3 being on pre-order was like, wow, that's good ambitious translating schedule. On September 26th, it'll be Free Haven Online, book number 2, The Lady Thunderlord. On September 28th, Couch Potato Chaos, Gamebound. On October the 3rd, Kingdom of the Dead and NPCs, Path, book number 2. On November 21st, Free Haven Online, Winter Dungeon Line. That's the 3rd book in that series. So there you go, folks. That's all the stuff I know that's coming out in the next few months. On to new releases and reviews. And in new releases and reviews, folks, we're going to begin with Reality Benders. That's not the picture I wanted. There you go. Reality Benders, book number 1. Not book number 1. Book number 2 in this series by Michael Antonoff, called The External Threat. It is 429 pages, $5.99. It is not available on Kindle Unlimited. Okay. Here is the author's description. The countdown timer continues to tick, but Earth is still not ready to repel an invasion force from space. Nat is on his voyage with the Shimaru, all the while trying to find backup for humanity among the great spacefaring races. After all, based on what he's already seen, he knows not to count on the good sense of his own kind. Even facing an external threat, the people of our Earth cannot see past their internal squabbles and come together to fight as one. Nat does not expect gratitude for his leaders for taking such matters into his own hands, but when have laws and rules ever stopped our intrepid hero before? So there you go. Some fun stuff. It is, again, 529 pages, $5.90. Pretty reasonably priced for the page count. Again, it's not available in Kindle Unlimited, though, so that's kind of the only choice you got. On the funny side note. Every time I see this cover, I always laugh. I really, I can't help but giggle a little bit, because the publishing company once like told me like, oh yeah, I remember seeing on Facebook something saying that the cover artist added extra elements into their cover page that aren't actually in the story. Like that lady on the cover in like the green bikini and the blonde with a bow and arrow, she's not in the story. And the covers just added her because they thought it was cool. And there's nothing really I guess the publishers were going to do about it. And it kind of explains why she's the only person on the cover without like a level or a character name, because she doesn't really exist in the story. Whenever I see it, I always think it's super hilarious to me. It's because it is difficult sometimes to work with cover artists who are artistic and they want a certain thing, but your story says a different thing. It's a whole thing. Sorry, side note. The review portion of this is this story is a continuation of the slice of life LitRPG adventure. This time, a heavy portion of the story takes place in the far reaches of space, as our intrepid hero is taken on as a prospector for an alien mining crew. Now, the main character gets into fights, levels up his skills, and even develops some of the hidden talents hinted at in Book 1. New alien cultures and characters are introduced, and it gets interesting to see how the main character uses his brain to navigate the delicate waters of alien social structure and customs. The story takes several unexpected turns, and I really liked how it developed. It didn't go into the direction I thought it would, but it was always fun for me, at least. If you enjoyed Book 1, you're going to enjoy Book 2. Really short review. I enjoyed the novel. I liked the first one a lot, though. I like the second one probably a bit more, just because there's less rural drama, and there's of course less introduction needed, because that was all done in Book 1. So like you get to the action, you get to the sci-fi LitRPG stuff a little bit sooner, and you stay there longer in the story. So I probably like this one, like it's a little bit more than Book 1. I do also like the fact that a lot of it was just not on Earth. It felt a little more science fiction because it took place in space for a good portion of the novel. And again, some of the plot twists were genuinely smart. I was like, wait, they're doing what with the main character? Where is he going? But it was always fun. And I do like the introduction, of course, alien social structures and construct, because the aliens shouldn't feel like they're humans, and they don't. They have some very specific customs and cultural views of the universe, which I thought were very fascinating, as far as like from making up anthropological like cultures and societies and like doing exploration of them. So good stuff there. I liked all those different points of it. If you didn't like Book 1, you're probably not going to like Book 2, but you probably wouldn't have bought it anyways. But if you like Book 1, I think you're going to enjoy Book 2. There's still some good action. There's still some good adventure. There are no like huge battle fight scenes like there were in Book 1, so just be aware that there's slightly toned back on the action stuff, but it's picked up by more adventure stuff, more cultural exploration, more science, sci-fi kind of spacey stuff which I enjoyed. So there you go. Gets a score of 7.6 out of 10 from me. That's External Threat Reality Benders, book number 2, with a score of 7.6 out of 10. Okay, on to Deadhead, a zombie apocalypse LitRPG novella written by David Payne. It is 86 pages, $2.99. It has a buy one Kindle Unlimited, and that price is way too expensive. I know it really is. For 86 pages, I would expect this to be like less than 99 cents. That's the price point I generally look for. I like a penny a page, basically. So for $3.99, it's honestly too expensive. But I do understand why authors do this, because on Amazon, anything priced at $2.99 above gets you a royalty of like 70%. Anything at $2.98 or below, whatever it is, less than $2.99, 30% of a royalty for every sale. So there's a significant difference. But I'm assuming most of these sales are going to come like Kindle Limited anyway, so shouldn't really matter too much. Here's the author's description. Addicted to gaming and looking for his next fix, Joe Denver hears rumors of illegal underground gaming dens run by the mob. Using technology stolen from the government, they have created ultra-realistic pain games, the most popular of which is the zombie apocalypse game known as Deadhead, with a $1 million prize. But Joe is about to get a whole lot more than he bargained for. Contains swearing, violence, and gore, and they are not kidding. This is a cursey book. It is like cursey, curse. Tons of cursing. Like every other paragraph, I believe, probably has curse words. So just a heads up, there is also violence and gore. It's not as pronounced as the other portions of it, and most of it is contained within like the game portion of it, so it feels a little more less real. But again, not something you probably want to read to your kids. Here's the review. The beginning of the story is to me kind of like a waste of time. And it includes like this long gamer addict diatribe about how he's an addict, but he likes being a gamer addict anyways, and like the feel of like the rush of being addicted to games is so amazing. And I'm like, okay, maybe. Like I'm not sure how many people are gonna like resonate with that particular description. It is there. Maybe it's part of character development, but honestly, I feel like it takes too much time. There's also like a meeting of one old friend and then another who tell him about this illegal full immersion game run by and developed by the mob, apparently, which just seems kind of convoluted. And all of it's just the excuse to get the main character into the game, and ultimately, like, it doesn't matter. Like, it really doesn't. I mean, to like the game element of the story, I should say. It matters to obviously the whole novel. There are points that reconnect it later at the end, but most of the novel is just like him in the game. The main character is in the game by the 23% mark, which means like the first 23% is like all real-world stuff that's honestly complicated, overly complicated, lots of cursing, and doesn't really matter. So like I said, small point. Once the game story gets into the game though, it's actually entertaining. It's good. It's just that first half, that first 23% is like kind of something to push through if you want to get to try it all. But once the story gets into the game mechanics kind of make this an entertaining story. The mechanics are part normal RPG with stats and character sheets, and also part choose your own adventure system, which I actually thought was really interesting. You get elements even in character creation where you roll for things. Like, for example, I think this is a little spoiler, but like there's a big game contest. Like, whoever finishes the game first gets $1 million from the mob, which is kind of suspect because it's from the mob. But there's a bunch of people in the game. And one of the first things they have to do is like roll for weapons to see like what they get. So if they get a high number, they have options to get better weapons. If they get a low number, they only get 1 or 2 pieces of duct tape or something. You know what I mean? And that very much mimics like what you would see in those older choose your adventure stories, where some of the choices you made in the story, the paths were, determined by just random dice rolls. And again, this was all. If you've never heard of a choose your adventure, I'm too old, I guess. But there are novels, like full-on novels, made out of paper, and you would go through them and you would kind of make choices within the story and would say, oh, if you want to choose this particular option, go to this page. If you want to go to this particular option, go to this page. But they also had RPG mechanics, character sheets. It was kind of a precursor to what is done with RPG games and computers now. So there you go. You can tear your property. You know what you're talking about. But I really did actually enjoy this aspect of the story, and that it tried to be a little different in that it pulling game mechanics from, partial at least, from a different source than just RPG tabletops and RPG video games. It's actually using something that some people can relate to and some people won't, but it does do a different job there. It also combines the zombie apocalypse portion of the story, where that's like the enemies, like it's a zombie apocalypse setting for the storyline and all the things that happen. And I think it was an interesting mix, and some parts were handled really well. Some felt a little forced in places, but they were interesting at least. Now, one of the things that's probably going to be a huge drawback for people, including myself, was how abruptly the story stops. Like, it's literally in the middle of this exciting fight scene. The main characters pull the game. There's some weak justification of the story, and it's just like the end. Yeah, exactly, and it's really frustrating. So, I like the middle section of the story. I did. I would probably give that portion like a 7 out of 10 if it was just by itself, the game portion. But the poor beginning, which was really kind of annoying, and I almost just didn't want to read past it, to be honest. And the end, which was just frustrating, is like, this is getting kind of good. This is an interesting arc. I'm curious where they're going to go. And it's just like, put on the brakes. It's the end. See you later. That stopped me from enjoying the story as much. So it's a score of 6 out of 10 for me. I couldn't quite give it a 7 because, again, the two endpoints of the story, the beginning and the end, were just kind of frustrating or annoying, or they didn't feel like they mattered. Even the middle is good. So for me, 6 out of 10, which is unfortunate. I wish that, honestly, the author had developed this into like a full-blown novel instead of being a novella. I think it would have been, more entertaining and more interesting that way. But like I said, author choice. This is the score I give for this one, though. 6 out of 10 for Deadhead, a zombie apocalypse LitRPG novella. There we go. Okay. And next we have The Apprentice of Arabella, written by Matthew Kent. It is 173 pages. It is $2.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Here's the author's description.
When his home and livelihood are ripped away, artist James Wolfe must struggle against an oppressive government to survive the journey from Fox Valley to Old Atlanta, where he hopes to start a new life. All things are possible in Arabella Online. And honestly, that description really only describes like the first 10% of the story. So it's interesting that it's not even like a tease for the actual game portion of the story. And I think there's just like several issues. Even in like the cover art for the story, for example, the people on the cover don't exist in the story. The main character is like a wood sprite, or I forget what it is, like a wooden imp, something like a short version of like an elf. And so this main character and this lady, I don't know who that is at all, to be honest. There aren't any like main female characters in the story. Like they don't really fit the story because they don't exist. In addition to that, the story doesn't actually advertise itself as LitRPG, but the author asked me to review it as such. So here's the review. I should say in advance also as well that there are some serious technical issues with the story that are going to bother some people. Like there are frequent missing words, punctuations, unclear sentences, and here's just an early example of sentence structure that stands out as like, oh, it's going to be a thing. So if the sentence bothers you, don't read the story. He had angry and frustrated as she and her partner had shown up at the crack of dawn to serve their warrant. So there you go. That's an example of the actual thing. So I'll zoom in on that so you guys can actually see what it says a little bit. Yep. He had angry and frustrated as she and her partner had shown up at the crack of dawn to serve their warrant. So there you go. So if that bothers you, don't read this. If you can ignore that, it's not a big deal to you, feel free to go ahead. The story itself can be divided into two parts, the real-life story and the in-game storyline. The real-life storyline sets up a future dystopian world where the government makes anyone it considers citizen disappear or kills them. It's supposed to be in like this far-flung future where there's been like biological attacks in the world. And so there's some kind of justification for this behavior from the government. But the main character, James, at the beginning of the novel, has his home seized but he escapes arrest because the authorities can't find a pretense to arrest him on. He flees and ends up playing a VR MMO where he plans to make enough money to flee the country or defend himself with lawyers from the government. And I have to admit, there's actually some really good world building here that paints a picture of a future where I wouldn't want to live in. Like the author goes out of his way to like give little like small details about like characters and the backgrounds and like religious persecution and conflicts that the government has with these communities, and really sets up the government as like this big bad entity that is trying to maintain control on almost this dying economic structure, which I think is really interesting because as much detail as goes into this, it's like not a lot of it matters. And I'm like, oh, that was slightly disappointing. The other part of the story is that there's a regular story between the real life story and the game focus. Sorry, a few more details about that as far as like the real storyline goes. That's fine. The in-game storyline is a pretty good slice of life LitRPG adventure with fighting, leveling, crafting. There were a few small arcs with PKers and a story thread about people trapped in the game that's actually teased throughout the in-game storyline. And I was like, oh, how is this going to play out? That's an interesting thing. It's not the main character that's trapped, it's other characters that he might have got into trouble accidentally, and how is he going to deal with that? But it ended up being kind of disappointing, like utterly disappointing how that was resolved. So just focus on the potentially good parts, which is just the slice of life adventuring and the fighting and the crafting. Crafting, as a note, is actually done really well. It's a significant portion of the in-game storyline. And it's relatively nicely detailed, especially some of the smithing stuff. You can actually tell that the author did some research into how old world smithing was done. But even though like it's mostly surface information where he's like using technical names or like describing details of a technique without actually describing the feel of the technique or the feel of the hammer, or it's just kind of a more technical explanation. But still, the author made the effort to do it, and it kind of shows in the work, which is why I appreciated it. However, the crafting really gets overpowered way too quickly, and it's a shame. It's like the main character starts the game on a Monday, and by Wednesday, it feels like he's a master crafter, even though his like levels don't really match, or his skill levels in blacksmithing or crafting don't really match the product that he's producing. Like he's producing legendary items, and I'm like, that doesn't make sense because of technical game stuff. And my gamer brain kind of got annoyed with it.
But again, overall, not bad stuff. The progress is just, he advances too quickly for it to feel reasonable. And it's, like I said, it's an issue. If you don't care about that, it's not going to matter. The rest of the game mechanics aren't particularly original or special, but they're not bad either. They're pretty standard, and they're detailed enough that they're interesting enough. The main character chooses to be like a bard, which is a very interesting choice, and it allows a little bit of different progression, I guess. But it's not really used a ton. Like, it's not. There are other stories that focus on the main character being a bard that do it much, I should say, better, or they do other interesting things with it. This one felt a little more standard slice of life, which is fine. There are also some inconsistencies in the story that really they bug the heck out of me. And maybe they don't matter to you. Maybe I'm going to list them off. For example, the main character is stated in the story that he doesn't know anything about gaming. Like, he lived a sheltered life where he's like trying to stay off the government radar, which means he's not really on the internet. He reads a bunch of like physical copies of books. That's what they find at his house. And it's kind of a low tech world, even to such a degree that when he actually logs into the game, the AI thinks he has a corrupted online profile because there's so little information there. Yet he seems to have like all the gamer knowledge in the universe. Like, he thinks like a gamer. He asks questions like a gamer about great. He starts using gamer terms that he probably shouldn't know, or at least question like what they mean. And so there's just like a slight consistency with like the description of the main character versus what actually he does. It's a small, like, for some people won't care, but for me, it's one of those things like, oh, your character should remain consistent in how much knowledge they have, and that just like that leads to a more cohesive like main character, because it doesn't feel like he's multi-personality or something. Additionally, a lot of people are interested in the main character, like the government, other guilds and stuff, and nobody ever explains why. Like, this is one of those things that's left hanging in the story, as far as the real life storyline goes. There's like this huge investment of like, oh, the government's trying to put this guy in jail. He's a huge threat, and it's never ever explained why that is the case. Like, there's no explained motivation, and maybe it's part of like the author's attempt to like create this sense of mystery or intense like suspense or whatever. It just doesn't ever pan out because there's no payoff about like, oh, what's the deal with this thing, you know what I mean? Like the real life storyline, like the government trying to get him. Additionally, there's just like another personality conflict between what the main character is supposed to be described as and what he actually does. The main character is supposed to be sneaky and distrusting enough to have a go bag ready when the government shows up, and he just takes off like he's been expecting it for a long time, and seizes his land. And yet he also has like contacts ready to make him like false identities when he's ready to flee the country and has the money for it. And at the same time, in game, he just reveals all of his in-game secrets to random strangers that he meets. And I'm literally not joking. Random people in the game world, or in like when he gets into the game section, will just come up to him and say, hey man, how's it going? That guild's not great for you. And he's like, yeah, I know, I just sent them on this, and he explains like his whole like devious plan plot point. I'm like, that doesn't make sense. Why would this paranoid dude just tell them that? And like I said, small little points of inconsistency that just kind of bugged me. Maybe they want you, maybe it'll be interesting character flaws for you, I don't know. But for me, it kind of a combination of those things made this not as enjoyable as I would have hoped it for. Like the in-game storyline, it goes from decent to entertaining, and it kind of varies depending on what it's doing. Like crafting stuff, I'm a fan of crafting, so maybe I'm slightly biased in that respect, but I liked it. It was entertaining enough. However, like the in-game storyline doesn't end up going anywhere, and some of the like interesting story arcs just kind of really disappointing. I was like, oh, is that what ends? Like they're really resolved literally in like a paragraph or two, but they were set up for like 30 or 40% of the story. Like they regularly come in and out. So I'm like, oh, that's okay. And that combined again with like the unfocused, kind of convoluted real life storyline that doesn't really mean much in the end, made it just slightly less enjoyable for me. So for me, it's not a boring story. It's not good for me. I think some people will actually find this story entertaining if they don't care about some of the things that I talked about. Like if none of those things bothered you when I was describing them, you probably like this story. You really will. For me though, it gets a score of 6 out of 10 because those things bothered me, and I was like, oh, I couldn't give it a 7. So there you go. It's a score 6 out of 10 for the Apprentice of Arabella, with a score 6 out of 10 again. Okay. Next we have World Tree Online, written by E.A. Hooper. Okay, this one is 525 pages, $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited, so an excellent price point as far as that goes. Here's the author's long description. When an update trapped millions of players in the most advanced VR game ever made, one man discovers an exploit that just might take him to the top of the world tree. In 2056, the world's most powerful AI system, Arcus, comes online. Created to extend human lifespans, it quickly designs new kinds of nanomachine therapies, in addition to making world-changing discoveries in health science. It also develops an advanced VR headset that uses consumer nanomachines to allow users to experience time faster in virtual worlds. 2 years later, Arcus released World Tree Online. The game's time dilation makes it so that 1 hour of playtime feels like 1 month to those in-game, allowing humans to live extended virtual lives that feel real. However, shortly after, an old gamer named Vincent joins World Tree Online, an update begins that stretches the time dilation to 1 year for every 5 seconds. Players are unable to exit the game during the update within an estimated time wait of 360 years. While trapped in the game, Vincent discovers an exploit in the physics that might take him higher up the world tree than he ever expected. Unfortunately, he crosses paths with the last moderator in the game, a young man named Lucas that uses his mod abilities to torture and subjugate other players. Lucas is willing to abuse his power to conquer World Tree, but Vince's exploit might just be the key to stopping him. Might be, sure. Okay, here's the novel review. This is a novel that, well, nothing in the novel describes it as LitRPG. Oh, sorry, maybe I got my confused. Maybe this is the novel that the author asked me to review and the other one wasn't. Sorry. It is the novel's author's also first LitRPG novel. So here it is. The novel on a whole, while technically LitRPG, often feels more like a fantasy story with cyberpunk elements or even a veneer of RPG. While the game mechanics exist and the RPG progress is made, there's not a whole lot of depth to them. Certain elements, especially the rune system, are used as a wand-wavy catch-all to create everything from enhanced armor to self-replicating cat food to television. There are really only 4 to 5 powers that players have, with a bunch of variations. The main characters' powers, both Vincent and Lucas, are not grounded in a game mechanic and might as well be spells from a normal fantasy story. As I continued to read more and more story, it felt the explanations for the things that came up felt better like they would fit in a fantasy story rather than with the DC magic system. Now, this, again, probably not going to bother a lot of people. But they contributed to the story, not really scratching that LitRPG itch for me. The story is told from 2 different perspectives. You have Lucas's and you also have Vincent's, and they're separate. Like every other chapter is going to be like a switch in perspective, and so you actually get the villain's point of view, which is Lucas, and you get Vincent's, who is the main character, who's supposed to be a 70-year-old man who's going into the game, but he's 20 in the game. Because it gives everybody a new young body. That particular aspect of it doesn't really play into the story very much. So just, he feels like he's 20 all the time. The game's big mechanic, the thing that makes it different from other stories, is time dilation. And it starts off with a 270-to-1 ratio, which means, again, 1 year in the game, 1 month in the game is the same as 1 hour of roll time, it seems honestly a little bit of a stretch as far as these stories go. I know a lot of stories will do 2-to-1 or at most 4-to-1, because there's kind of a fundamental understanding that the human brain, there are strains that are put on the human brain when you make it work faster. It's like overclocking your CPU. If you overclock it too much, it burns out. And that's kind of the general consensus of the genre, as far as being based on actual scientific and biological principles, that time dilation would have negative impacts on human minds and bodies and their perception of the universe, and actually burn them out and hurt them. So most stories don't push the time dilation too much. And this is probably the biggest stretch I've seen yet. 1 month for 1 hour of real time. Again, it's a 270-to-1 ratio. That's really big. But I guess I can kind of push it. I'm okay, fine. But when the novel stretches that even to a bigger extent with no real explanation of why, literally says the AI in the game is updating the story and he's increasing the time dilation and taking away pain filters. Why? No one ever knows, and there's no explanation ever, which is annoying. But the time dilation issue is it goes from 270-to-1 to 6,307,200-to-1.
ratio, which is again 1 year for every 5 seconds in the game. So like that feels like it would kill everybody. And so for me, that extra step was like, oh, that stretched it beyond the realm of believability for me, or I couldn't suspend my aspect of disbelief. And so it was one of the things like, oh, that was okay. That's a premise I can't jump on board with, but hey, if I can ignore that and just enjoy the RPG, the action adventure stuff in the story, maybe I'll like it. The other parts of the story are actually pretty well decent. The narrative structure again divided between Power and Lucas, the last moderator, Vincent, who just happens to have the unique but not well explained spell that isn't really grounded in game mechanics. That is the foil to that potentially. Lucas is actually a really good villain. He's irritating. He's very unlikable. So good job for the author for describing such a horrible character that you can sort of see his progression of the story, like how he becomes the villain. And it's just choices, and it kind of reflects of his over time. You get peeling away the layers, what kind of a jerk he really is. And now when you can have that appreciation for that villain that you really don't like and you want to fail so hard, that's a good villain, because the authors did a good job of making you not like them. Vince's story arc, the main character, the good guy, is mostly slice of life adventuring. And that's fine. Nothing wrong with that. Until the two sides collide. And before that, but not before the story has made several time skips of years or even decades. And this was again something that kind of annoyed me a little bit, because the time skips aren't just you jumping ahead a couple days or even weeks. It's months and then years and then decades. It literally goes 15 years later, 35 years later, 75 years later. And I'm like, and there's literally these jumps between the story, and you miss the progress that the characters do as far as in the RPG progress section of it. You just get summaries oh, here's this character's new sheet. He has these powers. No explanation how he got them or developed them. He just has them, and they're super awesome and overpowered or super cool. And we're just gonna tell you that they exist. And so the shown progress or the feeling of the main character earning those things is kind of lost in the story, at least for me. So that was the thing. Another big finale in the story was satisfying. It really was. It was a good ending to the story. It was good, but it didn't really make up for the other part of the story that didn't resonate with me, or made me feel like it was less of a lit RPG story and more of a fantasy story with some cyberpunk elements and a veneer of oh, this is some game stuff in there as well. Again, not a boring story. I just felt it felt more like a general fantasy story that didn't care as much about the game stuff. Like I said, if this was just a fantasy story, and I looked at that and judged it that way, I would actually think this was a good story. I would give it a 7 out of 10. But the RPG stuff, LitRPG stuff, just didn't satisfy. I'm not saying it's not LitRPG. It is. There's character progression. There are advancements in the stat system is a little bit different. That there's no actual level for every main character. So each character stat gets a level, which is the same as getting a number that you're improving it. But those things do increase over time. The main character works, he increases his power structure, his abilities grow. So it's definitely an RPG. It's set in a game, an RPG game world. It's just that those elements didn't have enough depth for that they felt meaningful. It felt like the main character's powers, the way the story is described, felt like a fantasy adventure, which is absolutely fine, except that this is LitRPG, which means that the game progression should feel meaningful. And for me, it didn't feel meaningful. I could have taken out the game stuff and it would have basically been the same fantasy story. Again, I'm not saying it's not a good story. The elements that were written, nicely written, good technical writing, makes a good villain and character development. It's just that the RPG stuff didn't really, the RPG stuff in the novel didn't really do it for me. So for me, it gets scored 6 out of 10. If you don't care about that RPG stuff, feeling super in depth or important to the story, great. You'll enjoy the story. I really do. I think there are a lot of good elements to the story, and I think a lot of people will enjoy the story. It's just that it didn't work for me because the LitRPG elements just didn't feel like they were in depth enough. They were, like I said, they exist, they do, but it felt very surface level kind of descriptions. And as the story went on more and more, it felt like that was more the case as the story went on. So it's a personal thing, I guess. I've listed out things that kind of bother me. And so for me, it gets a 6 out of 10. Roll tree in line. There you go. Okay. Last but not least, it'll be Rogue Dungeon, a LitRPG adventure, the Rogue Dungeon book number 1, written by James A. Hunter and Eden Hudson. Okay, it is 236 pages, $4.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Here's the author's description. Roic Van Graff, hedge mage and lesser noble of the Trisbin, is one of only a handful of freedom fighters left, and he knows the Resistance's days are numbered, unless they do something drastic. But when a daring plan to unseat the Tyrant King goes awry, Roic finds himself on the run through an interdimensional portal, which strands him in a very unexpected location, an ultra-immersive fantasy video game called Hearthworld. He can't log out, his magic is on the fritz, and worst of all, he's not even human. He's a low-class, run-of-the-mill dungeon monster, some disgusting blue-skinned creature called a troll. At least there's one small silver lining. Roic managed to grab a powerful magic artifact on his way through the portal, and with it, he just might be able to save this world after all. Unless, of course, the Tyrant King gets to him first. So there you go. The part of the description actually describes this as a dungeon core adventure. There actually is no dungeon core in this story at all. It's probably better described as having dungeon master aspects, and I'll get into the what that means in the review. First of all, the price is a little high for the page count. Again, it's at 236 pages for $4.09, which is about 20 cents per page. 2 cents per page, which is about double what I normally like to pay. But it's not horrible. I mean, it's an entertaining read. So if you want to go give it a chance, I'd say it's worth the shot. I'd say try out a sample first, of course. If you don't have Kindle Unlimited, if you have Kindle Unlimited, go read it, of course. You have no risk, and you're probably going to find it to be an entertaining story, at least I did. The novel is entertaining and incorporates several other subgenres, including like portal fiction, a dungeon master story, again, not a dungeon core story, slightly different, a re-monster story, or what's called a reincarnation story, and a slice of life LitRPG story. So it's a bunch of different elements, and I think the authors combine these things very well. Like, they make them interesting, and I like the way they did interplay, and they kind of took elements from them that were interesting and kind of put them together. The novel starts with the main character, Roic, in a traditional fantasy world. Like, it's with a writing-based magic system. And like I said, the beginning of the novel just is a fantasy story, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it definitely, if you just saw the beginning, you wouldn't be able to tell that this was going to turn into a LitRPG. Like, it really has a ton of world building. It's a fantasy story. Like, the magic system is described very efficiently. There's action, adventure, and it's in its own right. It could have been like an entire novel. Like, it could have been the beginning of a whole different fantasy stories novel. Then the main character has a failed attempt to assassinate the king, and he escapes through a portal, and this is all in the novel description, so I'm not spoiling anything, and he ends up in an alternate dimension to him, which is a VR MMORPG. And the discovery portion of the game mechanics, from the main character's point of view, kind of is learned from his understanding of magical principles. So he accepts readily enough that this is an alternate dimension, because the rules aren't the same as what in his in-world. And he sees the world through that lens of like, a stranger to a strange land, where he has to discover how the world works, what the rules are, and he understands it almost as like a foreigner coming into a land. And he never speaks of the world in terms of being a game, because to him, it's just another strange world with specific rules. And I really like that consistency in the story, that the main character never broke character. He never suddenly knows he's a gamer. He never suddenly realizes, oh, this is just a whole big video game, and it's an MMO, and how do I contact the devs? No, he consistently has the point of view of what his character is, which should be somebody from a fantasy world who thinks he's coming through a portal to an alternate dimension, which happens to be a video game to the reader. But to him, it's just another strange world. And I like that consistency. Game mechanic-wise, the story combines, again, a traditional MMO stat and leveling system with the unique quality of the main character as a monster. Remember, this is in the novel description, he comes into this world not as a human, but as a certain kind of troll. And so his abilities are actually a combination of those two things, being a player character and also being a monster. And he has the capacity to evolve like he would in a re-monster story, and where he and in these kind of stories, like
the whole point of the story is like, oh, the main character starts as this kind of monster, but through like progress or killing other things, it gets an experience to like evolve into something more interesting and more dangerous potentially with its own set of powers. And that is a capacity of this particular story. And I like the fact that that is incorporated because it makes, again, the game mechanics feel, again, different, interesting, and a little more unique. But you also took these similar characteristics from other more familiar LitRPG stories, and the main character, of course, can get skills. He levels, and when he dies, he respawns, and he gets experience points. He can loot other things, and he actually, part of the storyline is like him kind of gifting these abilities or these capacities to other NPC monsters, making them more interesting, more self-aware, and that incorporates some interesting community building, dungeon building aspects, which we'll get into a little bit. But again, this story does also have those dungeon master aspects. They don't come until like later in the story, and they're really only like a relatively small section of the story, like 10% of it, and it's all in one chunk, which is why I don't describe this as a dungeon core novel or as a dungeon master novel, because it's a very small section. Most of it's slice of life adventuring, like fighting against, like story-wise, the main character is in the novel by the 11% mark, and it's pretty slice of life. The main character, and a collection of allies, they fight off players who are coming into this dungeon and trying to conquer it, on a raid. And it's a relatively low level dungeon. And the main character, he's a monster then. So his job and his way of living is to fend off these adventurers. And there are some interesting storylines. I'm not going to like spoil it for you guys, but that's kind of what the story is for, like, I don't know, like 80% of this novel. It's just that action, adventure, defense, trying to level up, progress, getting these other allies, like bringing them to be self-aware, and like collecting, this group of people that around you that can, defend the dungeon in a non like NPC scripted way. Like the main character is trying to change that. But he's seeing this through like the lens of like his culture. Like he comes from medieval society. He's like, why are all these monsters just like standing around, like not reacting to these adventurers coming in? And that's something that he changes within the dungeon. And like I said, the dungeon mechanic portions come like I said, very late in the story when he is able to change things. But it's not like a super big part of the story. And so I would say this is more of a slice of life adventure than a dungeon master story. Let's see, anything else I'm missing. Nope, that's pretty much it. There are some long-term plans potentially for like the story relating to the main character's original world. But I think that's more like a series plan and not as much as something that comes into the story a lot. Like this story is mostly just slice of life. It's the main character going into a world, learning the rules, adventuring, leveling up, becoming more powerful, which is all perfectly fine. It's entertaining. Like I said, it's a good story. It's really good on the action side. It's really good on the adventure side. It's fast-paced relatively. And again, there are aspects of dungeon building, but they're not the main portion of it. I think there are going to be some interesting things that the author does with other characters from the story, like from the beginning portion, where there was a ton of time put into like world building there and like setting up like villains, like long term. But you don't really see a ton of that here. So it is what it is. The ending of the story, I have to say, was one of the things that kind of pulled down the story a little bit for me, because it felt a little rushed. Like that last, I don't know, like 15% of the story, it felt like really, I'm going to say if it's either rushed or it was just like really condensed in some way. I'm not really sure how to describe it. But it was a little bit wand wavy and disappointing in that, like the big resolution for some of the villains in the story were just a little bit too wand wavy for me. Like they basically like, oh, the main character, here's a new thing I have and never described before in the story, and that's how we resolve this. And oh, remember that guy from the beginning? Oh, look, he makes a magical appearance. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Doesn't make sense, but okay. Like I said, overall though, it's a small, tiny complaint. Overall, it was a good story, good action, good adventure, and again, interesting combination of other subgenres that make this a little more unique, but not unfamiliar. So for me, it gets a nice score of 7.5 out of 10. Entertaining. I had a good time with it, and that's with The Rogue Dungeon, a LitRPG adventure, The Rogue Dungeon, book number 1, with a score 7.5 out of 10. So there you go. And that's it. We are finished, ladies and gentlemen. That is the end of the show. Thanks for hanging out with me today. Remember, if you want to follow the podcast, a lot of places you can follow us and support us, whether it's on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Patreon, our webpage. There are also some other LitRPG groups that you might enjoy following. But if you want to find out all the ways you can support the podcast, you can go to litrpgpodcast.com/support. But until we can hang out again, ladies and gentlemen, remember to go read some LitRPG. Goodbye, everybody.